Hey, welcome back. So at this point in time, you have your black outline for the image you chose. You have chosen your color. If you're doing a portrait, you have your skin tone chosen. If it's a flower or something, you've chosen your color for that. And you have mapped out the highlights and shadows. So this demonstration is going to show you how to create a value scale within those highlights and shadows using simple blobs of color. And those colors are going to change in tone, tone meaning light and dark. So hopefully this all makes sense to you. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. All right, so now that I have my lights and darks mapped out on the face, it's time to go in and actually add them with the skin tone. So I'm going to unhide the actual skin tone there and make sure that your orange and green shapes are on a layer that is above both your black outline and your skin tone. If it's down here, obviously they're going to disappear and you won't be able to see them. So keep that at the top. And at the end of this, you can just delete this layer or hide it. That way you don't have these random green and orange lines throughout your face. But right now we need them to map out the light areas of the skin and the dark areas of the skin. So it doesn't matter what you start with. If you want to start with the shadowy areas, here's how you do that. First, you just take your eyedropper and get the skin tone again. All right, after that, you're going to tap the color and you're just going to drag the tone icon to the left a little bit. I probably went a little bit too far. You don't have to make an extreme difference here. I would make the difference subtle. So that's about right where it was before. You can tell with the two colors next to each other. I would just make it a little bit different, just like that. And then make sure you have a decent sized brush, I think around 2, and you want the opacity all the way up. And this is the shadowy area, so we're going into the green shapes. And this doesn't have to be perfect, so you don't have to get this exact. Just kind of go around these shapes, just like this. You can fill them in. If you want to add little areas like this. Oh, I think I'm on the wrong layer. Do you see how right here it's orange around that layer because I was showing you that before? We don't want that. We want to be on the skin tone layer. That's a very, very common mistake to make. I'm actually happy I made that mistake so you can see that. So if you notice that your marks are going above your black and your green and orange, then make sure you change the layer that you're working on. So I'm just going to come back in and try that again. Just trace around these blobs. And remember, they don't have to be perfect. You don't have to waste time getting this exact. There's just some subtle shadows happening around these areas. And sometimes I even go in and add my own little details throughout here. You can either just color areas in, or you can use the feature where you can just hold down your finger or the stylus in the center and it fills it in. Totally up to you. But I'm just gonna fly through here and create my shadows. As you can see, I'm actually adding some in areas I didn't originally put them. You don't have to do that, but just a thought. If you are just thinking, oh, I'm pretty sure the light hits this area a certain specific way, I'm gonna add a little more detail. I'm pretty sure there's gonna be some shadows here in the lips too. We can add more detail to that later. But I'm just gonna fly through and continue my shadows. And then I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. All right, so I mapped in all of the green blobs with that that little bit darker tone of the peach. But when I erase when I get rid of this box, there are some areas that are way darker shadows than others. For example, down here by the neck, in this area right, oops, I'm not in the right. This area right in here is a little bit darker. There are some darker areas like right up in here and maybe even a little bit right here. So what I'm going to do is go back in and choose a color that's a little bit darker again, and then go in and fill in a slightly darker shadow there. Oops, I'm on the wrong layer once again. Get rid of that. And then once I'm done with this, we will continue with the highlights. So I went ahead and filled in some other darker areas. I'm gonna take it one step further and get a little bit darker still, and just go in and add another little layer of dark shapes inside of my existing ones. Just because I know some of these areas are much darker. Like by the nostril, there's a dark shadow there. And you can see it's just kind of making these blobs on top of blobs on top of blobs. Just happening right within each other. And then once I'm done with this, I will move to my highlights. So if I want to move to the orange areas, and here's what it looks like so far without the orange and green. You can see we're developing some shadows. If I want to work with the highlighted areas, I lost my original color. So I go on here, I don't know if it was somewhere here, so what I do is I just use the eyedropper, get my original color, now I'm back to normal, and now it's time to find a lighter color for the highlights. So you're going to tap on your color again, and we're going to make this lighter this time. I'm going to bring it all the way, actually, it looks like I can just take it all the way over for my first highlight. And I'm going to do the exact same thing I did with the green, but I'm just going to do it around the orange. So I'm going to go around this area here, fill that in, if it will let me. There we go. And just continue working around. Once again, don't obsess over getting the shape exact. It's not really going to make a big difference on your final project. And I'm going to go in over top of all this and add detail to the flower there. So don't stress about that. And let's see, where did I miss? There's some areas over here. Just like that. And same thing with the shadows, where I start with larger blobs that were kind of darker and built my way in. So here's an example right here. There's a larger blob right here. And then the further I get in, a slightly smaller blob, a little bit darker, and then even smaller blob, even darker. So we're gonna do the same thing with the highlights. So we start off with this color. Now we can't make this color any lighter because it's all the way to the right. So we actually have to drag this in there towards the center where it's a little bit lighter, and that's going to give us a little bit more of a highlight. And you can kind of compare this to the shape or the color right here next to it. So let's work with that one. So like I said before, now this blob is going to be, oh, that's way too light. I'm going to reverse that and darken that up a tad. I'm still a little bit off, so I'm going to pick my, redo my color, and bring that in a little bit more to right there. And if I lighten it, there we go, that's what I want. And I'm just going to add some blobs within blobs. Just make sure they're a little bit smaller than your original ones. And then I'm going to get even lighter. For some, if that's way too light, you can always take the opacity down a little bit. It won't show up as bright. And that's pretty much just getting the highlights along the face. All right, there we go. So if I get rid of the orange and green layer and come back a little bit, get rid of that, and here is my face with shadows and highlights. You are more than welcome to keep those blobs with really defined lines around them, but the next step is going to be to show you how to blend those out, changing the opacity. So that's coming up right next.